I know for some people, yes, there are blessings in our lives, and we can be grateful for that. But perhaps things didn't get off to such a good start. Perhaps there were some things in your past and in your childhood that you're carrying around like suitcases. That it feels like it's impacting your mental health, your spiritual health, and even your physical health as well. Now, that's what we're going to be talking about today with Dr. Isabel Hunsinger from Doctor on a Mission. Isabel, kia ora. Thank you so much for your time today. We talk a lot about things that we can do something about. You know, if we're wanting to improve our health, we can change our diet, we can change our exercise, we can look at what we're doing from a nutritional point of view. But actually, there are also some things in our life which do affect our health, which we didn't necessarily have a lot of control over. And today, talking in particular about adverse childhood experiences, this has a significant impact, not just on mental health, but on brain health as well. I mean, in some ways, they're the same thing, right?
Absolutely. And I always start by explaining that we don't have a mental illness issue. What we really have is a brain health issue. And when we understand that there's many contributors that are affecting our brain health and we learn how to support them and heal them, then we're going to have a calmer mind. We're going to have better mental well-being to deal with all the kapows of life. And one of the contributors that we're going to be talking about today is adverse childhood experiences. Now, it's not a nice topic. It's hard work. And it was so cool because just before I was getting ready, Michael was praying over me, before I went on with Andrew. I said, Holy Spirit, what else do you want me to talk about? And he said, I want you to let everybody know that children want two things, love and to feel safe. And if they don't get that, at the beginning of life, specifically within the first 11 years of life, it will affect our brain. And in particular, a part of the brain called the amygdala. And it's just part back here. And the amygdala is where we have emotion. And the emotion plus trauma gets planted. The roots are deep. And if we don't learn to deal with that later on in life, I mean, I learned to deal with it in my 50s because I'd never learned about this in medical training. But if we don't learn about this and take care of that and pull those roots out, we'll be like Lot's wife. This is another download that I got from the Holy Spirit. I was like, oh, this is really good. We'll be like Lot's wife. You know how God says, don't be like Lot's wife. Well, Lot's wife kept looking back. And if we keep on looking back to what happened to us in our past, we're going to get stuck and we're not going to move forward and up with what God's got.
I thought you were going to make some comment about having too much salt in your diet. But but look, I mean, yes, it's important not to be like Lot's wife, not to look back. But actually, if we are stuck in some way, perhaps it is important to understand what did happen and how that might be affecting us so that we can develop strategies to move forward. So I don't want to be like Lot's wife, but we perhaps need to define some of the things that we're talking about. When we say adverse childhood experiences, people listening today saying, gosh, I'm not sure whether or not that was me. What sort of things are we talking about, Isabel?
Well, there's three big areas. And the first area is abuse, where you physically abused, hit. I know in the Bible it says it's okay to hit, but I mean excessive hitting. There's also emotional abuse, not getting love, not being cared for. And then there's sexual abuse. So that's one of the big areas.
As well as abuse, though, neglect can also do damage to how we feel about ourselves and also to brain development of children.
Yes, and that's the next big area of adverse childhood experiences, neglect in our childhood. Physical neglect, like for instance, we don't have clothing for school, we don't have shoes for school. I see so many kids going to school without shoes.
Wow.
Or holes in the bottoms of their shoes because the parents don't have the money or don't use the money specifically for their kids. I won't go down that rabbit hole. And then also food, not having enough food
Yeah.
And the other one is emotional, being distant and not giving them love. Like, you already know I love you. I already said it last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And coming back to those two things, knowing that they are safe and knowing that they are loved, that's not a one and done. That's something which children need to be constantly reassured of. I mean, this is the nurturing. This is what we need to get right, and tragically that doesn't happen. And sometimes, not wanting to do the blame game, sometimes it isn't the fault of the parents either, because this may be a situation that they've inherited. There may be some serious dysfunction within the family group. And, of course, the children are affected by that. Now, this is the third area, looking at household dysfunction. What sort of things are we looking at?
So we're looking at things like divorce. Divorce does affect our brain health for the kids. Like, hey, what did I do? Did I cause this to happen? Or substance abuse, mental illness, having an incarcerated family member.
Yeah.
That's huge. Or a mother who's treated violently.
Mm-hmm.
And also a father who's treated violently. And if the child is seeing that, that will affect them.
I mean, these are all examples of brokenness, and it perhaps causally makes sense that brokenness begets brokenness. That if we're from a household where things are, I mean, no household's ideal, don't get me wrong. Every family has problems, and hey, I'm sorry to my 5 children. I probably could have done better as a dad, but I did my best at the time, But actually, when we're talking some really serious brokenness, that means that children's brains don't develop, and they carry this through their life. And like I was saying beforehand, often the cycle repeats itself because they were from a broken household. Then that cycle repeats when they have children of their own. And unless somebody's saying, hey, I'm going to identify this, I'm going to name it, and we're going to put some strategies in place to heal the person that is broken and to break the cycle. I mean, this is possible from a family health point of view and from a brain health point of view.
Absolutely. And it is so generational. I mean, I've lived here for 23 years here in New Zealand, and I've seen it, it just perpetuates itself over and over again. And it's this culture of, oh, toughen up. Yeah. Or she'll be right, mate. Don't even talk about that. There's a lot of, this deck of cards close to people's chest. They don't share much, but you can see in their eyes that they're suffering.
Yeah. Now we are going to talk more about this, and honestly, I feel I need to say, if this conversation has triggered something, if somebody's responding and going, hey, that's me, hey, that explains why I'm really struggling in this area, I would encourage you to get some help, to get some support. DoctorOnAmission.com, of course, a place to go to unpack some of this. Now, we've got more to say in this area in particular, but just before you go, Isabel, you talked about this being your lived experience. Give some hope to some people who are out there who are perhaps saying, hey, this was my experience, that explains it. Well, I suppose that's me. Doesn't have to be the way you continue. You received full healing. You were able to, I suppose, restore what the locust took away, to use the biblical metaphor. How did that happen for you?
Well, it was in my 50s. I mean, here I was in my 50s experiencing anxiety, severe anxiety. And I had to, I just learned about adverse childhood experiences. And I was like, I want to take a deep dive and get healed from this, because I don't want to live like this. Because I know that it was bleeding into my family. My kids were experiencing anxiety too. So I did the work. It was the hardest work I've ever done in my whole life. And it made me realize, like, I first started to experience anxiety when I was 9. And that's when daddy, who was sick with alcoholism, had a rifle, and mom and dad's relationship wasn't that great. So he would be very intimidating and threatening. And, and I knew that he was going to kill us if mom didn't do what he wanted her to do. So every time, and we had a place out in the mountains, and every time daddy would shoot the rifle, we were down at the river, I always thought, oh my gosh, he killed her. So a rifle to me was mommy's dead and we're dead. We're next. Okay, so fast forward, God's got me living here in New Zealand. I'm walking in the country, and what happens during wine season? The bird shooters are going off.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And so in my mind, I was afraid I was going to get killed. So I had to retrain my brain. And now I can walk in the country during wine picking season and I'm safe.
Wow.
You know, but it's key. You got to do the work. But it was hard work. But I'm so grateful. And so is my family.
Isabel, thank you so much for sharing that story. And yeah, I mean, it leaves some scars, but scars can heal. And hey, by the grace of God, we can be the person that God has designed us to be. But hey, sometimes we need some help in that regard. As I mentioned before, I would really encourage people who are saying, hey, yeah, I've got some work to do in this area, to reach out and get some help and to look at some of the resources available on doctoronamission.com. Maybe you need some additional support as well, depending on how deep these scars go. But it's a great place to start, doctoronamission.com. Isabel, thank you so much for the work that you do. You're making the world a better place. Good on you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Have a wonderful week.